The lights don't go out all at once. They die in fragments, factory by factory, grid by grid, until the world realizes it has been running on a metal it never truly understood. Silver, the conductor of everything, the bloodstream of modern technology, and now it's disappearing. For decades, we treated silver like decoration, an afterthought, a relic overshadowed by gold. But gold is a symbol, silver is a function. It moves electricity, guides data, builds solar fields, and keeps every battery alive. Without silver, the machine of civilization stalls, and today, the machine is choking. Across the deserts of Nevada, in the tunnels of Mexico, in the fractured mountains of Peru, something unprecedented is happening. Output is collapsing. Mines that once fed the world now yield less each year, even as demand from electric vehicles, solar panels, and military hardware surges beyond historic limits. The warnings weren't whispered, they were screamed, yet dismissed as noise. Until now. Inside a silent Tesla factory, conveyor belts stand still. The hum of machinery, the signature of a future promised, has faded. Engineers stare at empty crates where precision silver components should be. Some shipments never left the ports. Others were bought out before they even existed. Unnamed bidders, hidden entities. The shadows moved first. Solar farms stretch across continents, but their expansion is slowing. Not because of land, not because of labor, but because the one element that makes sunlight usable is vanishing. Each panel requires silver, tiny threads of high-purity metal that turn photons into power. Remove that thread, and the green revolution becomes a green illusion, a fragile dream collapsing faster than it was built. Governments call it a temporary imbalance. Analysts call it volatility. But those words are designed to calm, not to inform. Beneath the surface, the truth is raw. We are consuming more silver than the world can produce every year. And once a deficit begins, once above-ground stockpiles shrink, panic does not arrive gradually. It kicks the door in. In the COMEX vaults, inventories once measured in tens of millions of ounces have thinned to historic lows. Traders know what it means when shelves empty. Banks know. Insiders know. But the public, kept pacified by charts, forecasts, and televised optimism, has not been told what comes next. When a metal required for energy, transportation, and digital infrastructure becomes scarce, economies don't adjust. Economies break. And behind the scenes, the scramble intensifies. Megafactories are fighting for allocations. Defense contractors are battling for long-term supply. Every major technological ambition rests on a metal slipping through humanity's fingers. The race is no longer about innovation, it's about extraction. Whoever secures silver secures the future. But the most chilling truth is this: silver is not like oil. You can't drill more of it when the price rises. You can't synthesize it in a lab. When it's gone, it's gone. The earth decides the supply, not the market. The collapse isn't coming. It has already started. Not with explosions or riots, but with silence. Silent assembly lines, silent grids, silent vaults where bars once gleamed. A new kind of darkness is approaching, not from war or weather, but from the slow extinction of the metal that powers our world. And as the shadows deepen, one question echoes through every sector of modern civilization. When the silver runs out, what runs the world? Empires never fall in a single moment. They erode, quietly, predictably, following patterns so old they feel like prophecy. And every few centuries, humanity learns the same brutal lesson. When silver vanishes, power shifts. Not metaphorically, literally. In the ancient world, silver wasn't just currency, it was civilization. Rome rose on the back of its vast mining networks in Spain, flooding the empire with denarii that paid soldiers, fueled expansion, and kept provinces obedient. But as the mines depleted, Rome's silver coins grew thinner, their purity diluted, their promise decaying. Soldiers were paid in worthless metal. Trade collapsed. Inflation roared. The empire cracked from within long before invaders arrived at the gates. The fall of Rome wasn't a mystery. It was a mineral shortage. Centuries later, the pattern resurfaced in China under the Ming dynasty. Silver flowed into the empire like a river. Taxes, trade, international tribute, all anchored to the metal's stability. But when global supplies tightened and foreign merchants redirected shipments, the Ming economy suffocated. Peasants revolted, provinces rebelled. The dynasty imploded under its own monetary vacuum. Again, a superpower brought to its knees by a shortage it thought it could control. Then came Spain, drunk on the illusion of infinite wealth after draining the mountains of the New World. For a moment, it commanded the world, fleets, armies, kingdoms. But silver gluts turned into scarcity, the mines dried up, and the empire that once ruled continents was reduced to a debtor nation scrambling to pay its own soldiers. Power migrated, first to the Dutch, then the British, each empire rising on fresh supplies, each falling when the metal ran thin. This is the cycle. Silver rises, empires rise. Silver falls, empires fall. It has repeated for 2,000 years with chilling precision. But the pattern is deeper than geopolitics. Silver has always been the metal of capacity. In ancient times, it enabled armies and trade. In early modern history, it powered global finance. Every transformative era demanded more of it, until the supply could no longer keep pace. Civilization expands until silver says, stop. Today, we stand on the brink of the same historical hinge, but magnified. Because unlike Rome or the Ming, our dependence on silver isn't limited to currency. It is embedded in the physics of modern life. Electricity, optics, energy conversion, computing. Where past empires used silver as money, we use it as infrastructure. Where they needed ounces, we need tens of thousands of tons. History didn't just rhyme, it escalated. And yet every cycle shares the same anatomy. First, consumption rises quietly. Then supply plateaus. Then scarcity arrives suddenly, always unexpected, always unprecedented, though it never truly is. Finally, power shifts to those who anticipated the vacuum. When Spain collapsed, the merchants who held bullion became the new elite. When the Ming fell, those with private silver stores rewrote the economic order. When Rome debased its coins, citizens who saved real silver preserved their generational wealth, while the empire itself crumbled. The winners in every era were not the rulers, not the armies, not the bureaucrats. They were the ones who recognized the metal's importance before the crisis became visible. History is not subtle about this. Civilizations do not run out of silver. They run into the consequences of running out of silver. And now, as the modern world burns through its remaining resources at a pace no era has ever seen, the pattern is repeating with mathematical clarity. The collapse of supply, the overextension of industries, the denial of officials, the silence before the storm. Every empire believed it was different. Every empire claimed its systems were too advanced to fail. Every empire ignored the warnings until the metal was gone. Ours is no different, except for one chilling factor. Never in history has a single technological species required so much silver so quickly for so many essential systems. Rome needed it for coins. We need it for civilization. The old pattern is unfolding. The question is not whether the cycle will repeat. It's who will control the outcome this time. Because the world has entered the same historical corridor every fallen empire once walked, yet refuses to admit where the path leads. Factories don't scream when they're starving. They just slow, then stutter, then stop. And across the modern world, that slow death is beginning to echo in perfect rhythm with a pattern we've seen before. Every civilization that ran out of silver thought it was unique, just like we do now. But this time, the stakes aren't national or imperial, they're planetary. For the first time in human history, silver isn't being hoarded in vaults. It's being consumed, burned into circuit boards, buried inside solar panels, embedded in sensors, satellites, medical systems, and billions of devices that will never be recycled. We're launching silver into space. We're scattering it across deserts. We're soldering it into machines designed to break down long before the metal can be recovered. And the numbers don't lie. Solar manufacturing, once a footnote in global demand, now devours more silver than entire nations once held in reserve. By itself, this single industry consumes so much of the supply that miners cannot keep pace. Every solar panel requires a thin, invisible lattice of high-purity silver to convert sunlight into something usable. Multiply that by millions, then by billions. The green revolution runs not on hope, but on a metal that is slipping away. Meanwhile, electric vehicles have become black holes of consumption. A single EV uses up to twice the silver of a traditional car. Scale that to Tesla's production, then scale it again to China's, Europe's, and the silent storm of new factories rising across the globe. The world believes it's transitioning to a clean future, but the transition itself is devouring the very resource required to fuel it. Then come the giants of consumer electronics: phones, tablets, servers, satellites. Each component a tiny drain, insignificant alone but catastrophic in aggregate. Humanity now uses more silver for industry than for jewelry, currency, or investment combined. And not one of those devices is returning the metal to the supply chain. But the parallel becomes darkest when you compare past cycles of scarcity to today. Ancient empires collapsed because their monetary systems ran dry. Our crisis is structural, existential. We aren't facing currency failure, we're facing infrastructure failure. When Rome diluted its coins, soldiers revolted. When the Ming lost its silver supply, tax systems imploded. But when we run short, the grid weakens, hospitals stall, data centers go dark, satellites fail, autonomous systems shut down. The fundamental mechanisms that hold civilization together begin to flicker. The world is sleepwalking into the same historical trap, but on a scale no empire has ever attempted. A dependence on silver so absolute that removing it would collapse modern life in a matter of days. And yet, the warnings are buried under optimism. Analysts insist new mining projects are coming online, ignoring the geological reality that ore grades are shrinking, extraction costs are rising, and discovery rates have hit a 50-year low. Every future supply projection assumes growth. None account for depletion. It's the same delusion every empire embraced just before the crash. Governments promise recycling will save us, but silver embedded in electronics is lost forever, locked away in landfills and scrap heaps with no economic method to reclaim it. The world is clawing through the last accessible reserves, mistaking momentum for permanence. The parallels to history are not coincidences. They are warnings. Rome believed its mines would last forever. Spain believed the New World was infinite. The Ming believed the global flow of silver could not be interrupted. And now we believe technology can outrun geology. But it can't. The fuse is burning faster than supply can replenish. Every industry is accelerating toward the same bottleneck. Every nation is dependent on the same vanishing metal. Every projection hides the same unspoken truth. We didn't just repeat the pattern, we amplified it. And anyone who understands the past knows exactly what comes next. Money cycle scribe Danoi. They always tell us shortages are accidents, market fluctuations, temporary distortions. But silver's disappearance is not an accident, it's an operation. A deliberate reallocation of the world's most critical metal into the hands of a few entities who understand exactly what happens when the supply runs dry. The public sees chaos, but behind the curtain, there is choreography. It begins with the banks. For years, major financial institutions orchestrated a quiet suppression of silver prices through paper contracts, claims on metal that didn't exist, promises backed by empty vaults. The lower the price, the easier it was for insiders to accumulate physical silver without alerting the world. COMEX inventories drained ounce by ounce while the price barely moved. To the surface, the market looked stable. Underneath, the shelves were being emptied by invisible hands. Then come the industrial giants, companies whose demand is so enormous, so relentless, that entire continents of mining output are funneled toward them. And among these giants, one name eclipses all others: Elon Musk. Tesla, SpaceX, Starlink, each one a machine built from silver. Every electric vehicle that rolls out of a gigafactory siphons more silver than entire Roman provinces once produced in a year. Every Starlink satellite relies on silver-coated components to survive the radiation of orbit. Every megapack battery, every solar array, every autonomous sensor, silver, silver, silver. Musk's empire does not run on vision, it runs on metal, and that metal is disappearing. In boardrooms, shielded from public view, contracts are renewed years in advance. Mining companies sign quiet, long-term agreements with tech titans, locking future production into private channels. What remains for the open market is the leftovers, scraps of a supply chain already spoken for. Manufacturers outside the elite circle find themselves outbid, outmaneuvered, and ultimately shut out. Governments play their part too, not through action, but through silence. They know silver is a strategic resource, vital for energy, military systems, telecommunications. They know stockpiles have dwindled to historic lows. Yet no nation warns its citizens. No administration discloses the trajectory. Instead, they release reports framed with optimistic language. Manageable deficits, temporary constraints, market adjustments. Euphemisms engineered to buy time while the elite secure the last remaining reserves. Meanwhile, intelligence agencies track geological data with a level of attention once reserved for oil fields and missile sites. Nations are mapping silver veins like battlefield assets. Some countries have already classified their domestic reserves as matters of national security. Others are securing foreign mines through proxy corporations and shell investment groups, disguising state acquisition as private business. When the crisis breaks into daylight, the narrative will be simple. No one saw this coming, but they did. They just didn't tell you. And at the center of this tightening web stands a truth too large to ignore. Elon Musk is not merely a consumer of silver. He is a competitor for the future. Every satellite he launches, every EV he produces, every solar installation he deploys pulls silver out of circulation permanently. Musk isn't buying metal, he's absorbing it, removing it from the planet's functional supply. His companies aren't preparing for a shortage, they're accelerating it. And yet, he is only one figure in a much larger structure. Banks manipulating paper markets, governments concealing depletion, corporations hoarding stockpiles, all moving toward the same unspoken objective: control. Not of money, not of energy, but of the bottleneck that will define the next century. Because whoever controls silver controls the grid. Whoever controls the grid controls civilization. And whoever controls civilization decides who gets left in the dark. The revelation is not that silver is running out. The revelation is that the people who know this have already positioned themselves for the world that comes after. The world doesn't collapse with an explosion. It collapses with a flicker. One light failing, then another, until entire cities pulse with the unstable heartbeat of a grid that no longer has the metal required to survive. This is the inevitable future we are walking toward, not because of a single bad policy or a single ambitious billionaire, but because the foundation of our technological age is built on a resource we treated as disposable: silver. For decades, humanity expanded as if the supply were limitless. Solar farms stretched across continents, data centers multiplied like neural clusters, electric vehicles flooded highways, satellites wrapped the planet in a steel and silver web. And all the while, the world ignored the immutable truth of geology. Once silver enters a device, it rarely comes back out. Consumption becomes removal. Removal becomes scarcity. Scarcity becomes crisis. The moment the deficit becomes undeniable, the chain reaction begins. Solar production slows first, not drastically, just enough for analysts to issue cautious statements and for politicians to promise rapid adjustments. But without silver, every kilowatt of green energy becomes more expensive. Every new panel becomes harder to justify. Slowly, silently, the renewable transition decelerates. Electrical grids, built on promises of clean abundance, begin to strain. Then the electronics sector tightens. Manufacturers stretch inventories, redesign circuits, delay product lines. Phones, servers, medical instruments, all dependent on micro-silver components, become harder to produce at scale. Prices rise, supply thins. And for the first time in decades, multinational corporations whisper the words they swore would never return: rationing. But the true breaking point comes when the military sector enters the race. Silver is essential for communications, weapon systems, targeting arrays, hardened electronics. When scarcity reaches defense contractors, governments stop pretending. They intervene. They commandeer supply. They classify data. They prioritize national security over civilian industry. And the market the public once relied on becomes an illusion, because the state now owns the shortage. At that point, silver is no longer a commodity. It is a triage protocol. Hospitals compete with factories. Factories compete with energy providers. Energy providers compete with defense agencies. And behind them all, central banks quietly rebuild strategic reserves, not with gold, symbolic, inert, but with the only metal capable of keeping civilization's nervous system alive. When the average person finally realizes what has happened, it's not through economic charts or government announcements. It's through the everyday inconveniences that feel small at first. Rolling blackouts, delays on essential electronics, longer wait times for EV repairs, sudden price spikes that cannot be explained by normal market activity. The cracks widen, the tension spreads, the illusion breaks. And yet within this darkness lies a paradoxical sliver of hope. The same hope that has existed in every era of silver scarcity. Collapse creates clarity. It strips away the noise, the promises, the corporate narratives, and reveals the metal for what it truly is, the backbone of progress. Across history, those who recognized the pattern early did not merely survive the transition, they shaped the world that emerged afterward. When Rome debased its currency, those who held real silver preserved their power. When the Ming fell, private silver holders became the new economic elite. When Spain's mines ran dry, the nations that had secured their bullion ascended. Scarcity punishes the unprepared, but it elevates the informed. And in our century, that truth becomes even sharper. Because while governments and corporations scramble to secure their futures behind closed doors, individuals still have a window, a narrowing one, to understand the stakes before the world's largest institutions make their next moves. The inevitability is not that silver will run out tomorrow, it's that the trajectory is already locked in. The consumption curves are rising, the mining curves are falling, and the gap between them grows wider each year, like a fault line spreading under the weight of modern civilization. But inevitability is not destiny. It's a direction, one that can either be acknowledged or ignored. The warning signs are here. The history is clear. The crisis is unfolding in slow motion for anyone willing to see it. The world is marching toward a threshold that will redefine energy, technology, economics, and power itself. And in the silence before that turning point, one truth waits, uncomfortable, undeniable.